thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. This is an incredible turnout. And again, I just think it really speaks to how engaged our community is with things that are going on and how informed our community is. So it means a lot to have you here. I appreciate you spending some time with us on a Saturday morning. I'm Ethan Corson. I'm the Kansas State Senator for Kansas State Senator for Senate District 7. For those of you who don't know, our district is, we start on the Johnson County side of the Johnson-Wyandotte line. We're on 47th Street. We go south to about 95th Street, and then we go from State Line to about 6 blocks west of Metcalf. So all are part of those 10 Northeast Johnson County cities, which means I have 10 mayors that I'm always talking to. And so it feels like so much has transpired since we last met. I was thinking this morning, I almost don't know where to start. So a lot of the stuff that has generated a lot of headlines has initially started on the House of Representatives side of the Capitol. And so I want to make sure that my update is short enough that we leave plenty of time for our House colleagues to explain everything that they have been dealing with, because we sort of bounce back and forth. But it seems like for whatever reason, this session, a lot of the more controversial pieces and the things that have generated a lot of the headlines that you've probably seen have started on the House side. So I want to let my colleagues give you those updates and understand what it looks like in their chamber. So just to give you a sense of where we are in the legislative session, we are moving incredibly quickly. We've condensed the legislative calendar, and so we are already more than past the halfway mark in the legislative session. And so what that means is that this past week that we just completed was our first week after what we call turnaround, which is the simplistic way to think of our legislative session is that the first half of the session, you have the Senate hearing, debating, and voting on bills that start in the Senate, bills that were introduced in the Senate. Similarly, the first half of the session, the House is working on bills that were introduced in the House, and they're hearing, debating, and voting on those bills. And then we have what is called turnaround, where with some very notable exceptions, though, but everything, if a Senate bill is not passed by the Senate by turnaround, it's considered dead for that legislative session. Similarly, if a House bill is not passed by the House by turnaround, it's considered dead for the legislative session. Now, nothing is really ever dead until we adjourn for the legislative session, but that is at a big picture level what's going on. So we're now in the part of the legislative session where the Senate has been sent all the bills that the House passed. And so now we are working on the bills that our House colleagues have sent to us. And our House colleagues are now working on the bills that the Senate has passed and sent over. So that is sort of where we are in the legislative session. A couple of things that I want to update you on from our perspective in the Senate is, I will start with the positive. One thing that we did pass in the Senate that I'm hopeful that will make it through the House and get to the governor is we passed a bill that would reform our what is called the 340B prescription drug program. And right now there's a real monopoly in the prescription drug market as it relates to pharmacies and how they are being reimbursed for their services. And this has put a lot of pressure on pharmacies, on our smaller independent pharmacies, particularly in our rural areas. Several other states have tried to take meaningful steps to address this, and they've seen real positive changes in terms of making sure that our smaller and independent pharmacies, particularly in our smaller towns, are able to stay open. That did pass on a bipartisan basis in the Senate, so that is currently in the House, and I think that would be a very positive step in reforming that process in a way that is going to make sure that we keep access to pharmacies, particularly in the more rural areas of the state. So folks aren't driving incredible distances to get prescriptions filled. We want to keep those pharmacies open. So I really applaud colleagues in both parties for getting that done. And again, hopeful that the House will take that up as well. One thing I've been really working on, I introduced a series of bills to try to keep more money in the pockets of working folks. Unfortunately, only one of them has really made it a little bit down the ways. So I want to tell you about that one. But I was really excited about this bill because I think it would provide really broad-based relief to all Kansans. And it is a bill that would provide a vehicle registration tax credit on every vehicle that is registered in the state. Because when I came up with this idea, I was looking for what is essentially the broadest base of people that we could provide tax relief for. And so if you focus on homeowners, you don't necessarily capture the 1/3 of folks who are renting. And so I was thinking, what is the broadest class of Kansans so everybody could see a benefit from this? So what I came up with is a $250 tax credit for every vehicle that is registered in the state, because we are a state where, again, most folks own vehicles, and that is a form of property tax. That is property tax relief. So what the bill would do is say that when you go in to register your vehicle, you start with a $250 credit. So if your vehicle registration tax is under $250, you would pay nothing. If it's over $250, you would just pay the difference. So if it was, say, $400, if it would normally be $400, you would just pay $150 instead of $400, because you would start with that $250 credit. When we looked at it, this would mean that there are 3.1 million vehicles registered in Kansas right now, and 2.5 million of them would have the registration tax completely eliminated. And then the other 600,000 would have the registration tax reduced by $250. The other piece of that bill that is unique is that this would be paid for out of the rainy day fund instead of the state general fund. So it would not come out of the state general fund budget. And it would be about $250 million that would be transferred out. So a way to keep more money in the pockets of most Kansans. So we had a hearing on that in the Senate Tax Committee. It did get really broad bipartisan support. I mean, it seemed like an idea that everybody liked because it would, again, capture so many folks. So I'm hopeful the bill is still alive, and so I'm hopeful that we could advance that, but it did get a very positive reception. We are going to be, this coming week in the Senate, going to be working on the budget. I know that my House colleagues debated the budget, the House budget this past week. We'll be doing the Senate budget this week, and then eventually we'll be reconciling those. And I sometimes think that the budget, a lot of things generate headlines, and the budget kind of goes under the radar, but that is one of the single most important things that we do every year as a legislature, because it really does signal what are our priorities as a state, and where we are putting resources. I think says a lot about what our values are. One piece that I'm particularly concerned about with the budget is special education funding. This continues to be an area of real concern. We continue to dramatically underfund our special education obligation as a state. So I want to make sure that we are putting the money that we need to get us to a position where special education is fully funded. One of the more interesting things, and it kind of shows you that if you live long enough, anything can happen. I last Friday, not this past Friday, but the Friday before, myself, Representative Sawyer Clayton, Board Member Haas, and another legislator, we were principals for a day at Shawnee Mission South, which my buddies all got a kick out of, because I could still see the place where Coach Thompson would sit when I would be walking into gym class, and he would say, "Corson, are you working hard or are you hardly working?" So 25 years later, we were back. But one of the things that we did talk about with Dr. Dane, who is the principal there, is just the real impacts of this special education shortfall. It's, I think, something that it's not just a talking point for elected officials. It really does matter. And what he described to us is that he has been in a position where he's had to pull funding out of the performing arts budget to cover special education obligations for students at Shawnee Mission South. And that again is because the state, those are expenses that should be reimbursed by the state and federal government and are not being. And so it has a very real, tangible impact, again, not just on the students receiving those special education services, but on every student in the school is affected when we don't fully fund special education. So we will be doing the Senate version of the budget this week. I know an issue that has been really important to folks in our community has been the issue around the Shawnee Indian Mission. We almost, I thought we made it through the legislature without this legislative session, without this popping up again. But just last week, a bill was introduced, this time in the Senate side, to again convey the Indian Mission from the state. And so I would encourage folks, reach out to me, let me know your views on that. Reach out to members. What's unique about this year is that traditionally that bill had gone to the Senate Federal and State Affairs Committee. Senator Thompson, who chairs that committee, has really not had a lot of interest in advancing that bill. This year, they were able to get it sent to the Senate Commerce Committee. So they'll have a different, I think maybe the thought is we'll have a different group of senators and see if they're maybe more receptive to the idea. So, reach out to me if that's something that you would like more information about and how you can express your views on that. But I did think that we'd almost made it through, but not quite. And there is a hearing on that bill in the Senate Commerce Committee this coming Wednesday. So with that, I want to stop and I want to turn it over to my next colleague, Representative Jerry Stogsdill. Thank you again for being here, everybody.
Thank you. Nice to see you all here this morning. I'm probably going to change my speech a little bit this morning. I usually try to start off with something a little humorous that happened in Topeka this week or this last month. But I'm a former naval weapons officer. And when I woke up this morning and found out what we were doing in the Middle East, it made me sick. And, it's very easy for our, quote, commander-in-chief to send our young men and women into harm's way, knowing full well that none of his family or him have ever served or ever will serve or ever be in harm's way. So what does that have to do with Kansas? Ask the people at McConnell Air Force Base and Fort Riley and Fort Leavenworth and the Army National Guard and the Air Force National Guard and the Army Reserves and the Air Force Reserves here in Kansas. All of those people could be involved in this. We don't know how far it's going to go, but I'll tell you, with the with the leadership at the president's level and the leadership at the Department of Defense, it scares me to death. So anyway, that's, hate to start off as Donnie Downer this morning, but I think that had to be said. It does impact people in Kansas. I've had friends killed in war, classmates from Topeka High. A friend of mine who was just, I looked at as almost an older brother. Jim was one of the most engaging people you ever knew, captain of his football team in college, married the homecoming queen. He was all excited about becoming a helicopter pilot. He dropped out of school, went to the Army to become a Huey combat pilot. A friend of mine and I and his wife and young daughter took him to the airport to leave for Vietnam. And we were all talking and laughing and hoping to hear about all the stories he'd have when he came back. A week later, he was dead, shot right out of the sky on his first mission. So I take a lot of this very personally. And anyway, I'll try to switch over to at least what happened on the Water Committee this week. And on education. And in water, we talked about, actually we had some discussions about the lesser prairie chicken. And our bone-spurred chicken in Washington is going after our lesser prairie chickens. And why would he do that? Well, if you get the protections off of those lesser prairie chickens, and I don't know where the better prairie chickens are, but the lesser ones anyway, are, if you get those protections taken off, guess what? It opens up for what comes out of Washington that they're always interested in. Oil and gas leases will be much easier to get and much more widely spread across Kansas if just for that one reason that they now don't have the protection on those birds. So we'll see how that goes. And how is that concerning water? Well, we don't know for sure how much these oil wells and so on might impact water quality and quantity out in western Kansas, where they've done a lot of fracking south of Wichita. It's increased the number of earthquakes down there exponentially. So we hope and we think that it's not going to have a great impact, but we don't know that for sure. But I guess we may find out. And the rest of the Water Committee has always been one that I've really enjoyed serving on because we've done some really good stuff in there over the last 6 years. But this year it's been kind of quiet because we don't know what's coming out of Washington again. With the EPA rules, they have reduced the number of things that we are now going to test for in our drinking water. And it's just been kind of, we're just waiting to find out. And we don't really know at this point. But the committee has really done great bipartisan work. And I commend the Republican chair of that committee for keeping us all together on these issues. And hopefully by next year, we'll be able to understand what we're dealing with and deal with that. The other is the Education Committee. And there's a couple of things that we talked about that I think are going to be really significant. One of them, in my opinion, this is the worst session I've seen in 10 years. And that is a very high bar. We're talking Olympic pole vaulting bar. And we have not needed a pole to get over that. We've high jumped that in street shoes. So, and one of the reasons that we've done that is the Charlie Kirk bill, where we designated October 14th as Charlie Kirk Day in perpetuity in the state of Kansas. Yeah. And the response on the other side of the aisle over the last couple of weeks was, oh, well, he was all about free speech. Well, I'm all for free speech, but not when you use it for hate, not when you use it for bigotry and racism and misogyny. And I think it's And I think their end game for all of this over the last 10 years has been to slowly chip away at the rights and responsibilities of our local school boards and our state board of education. And I think their end game is that they want to control curriculum in Topeka, in the legislature. And this Charlie Kirk thing was a step in that direction. Because what are teachers going to say next October the 14th when it's Charlie Kirk Day? And kids ask them and say, well, who's this Charlie Kirk? Why do we have a whole day to celebrate him here in Kansas? Is that teacher going to have to say, well, because he was a great American hero and he was all about freedom of speech. And that'll be fine with a lot of the powers to be in this state. Or is they going to be honest and say, I have no idea. He was a racist. He was a misogynist. He was a bigot. And I'll probably get fired for saying that. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. Again, no effort at all to return like due process rights to teachers and so on. But I think part of the problem this year with the legislative session has been talking to a lot of friends of mine across the aisle. They're scared to death that they're going to get their heads handed to them in November. And I think instead of being, instead of showing moderation, I think they're trying to pass every bit of miserable legislation they can get away with this year. And I think that's really going to backfire on them. And I think a lot of them know it's going to backfire on them. So we've got to focus on that between now and November. And the other thing that's going on in education that scares me to death is the fact that they are really emphasizing making sure that we don't use diversity, equity, or inclusion at our colleges and universities across Kansas. And I saw something on Facebook a few weeks ago that really made an impact on me. We are absolutely awash in Christian symbolism, lapel pins, necklaces, prayer groups, Bible studies up there, and yet we act in the most unchristian way possible. And there was something on Facebook that said, diversity is God's creation, and equity, fairness is God's justice, and inclusion is God's family. And I thought that was profound. And we need to remember that when they're trying to do away with all references to DEI at our colleges and universities. And I can tell you right now, talking to some of the leadership at our colleges and universities over the last 2 or 3 months, they're scared to death of this. We're losing our foreign students who are some of the best and brightest from all across the world, and they're leaving. And you know who they're being recruited by? China, Canada, and Europe. And now, according to people at a couple of our universities, they're coming after our professors as well. Say, why would you want to be staying in America and having your academic freedom questioned? Come to China, come to Canada, come to Europe. So we're going to have to be very careful in how we deal with that, and hopefully we will be able to deal with that when we come back next year with a whole new legislative session. So that's about all I've got to say this morning, but I'll be happy to try to stand for questions at appropriate time.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm Rishu, House District 25, which is Northeast Johnson County. Kind of to Jerry's last point there, I want to talk about inclusion just real quick. I think many of you have probably seen that SB 244 went into immediate effect this week. That's the trans driver's license bill and bathroom bill. Quite frankly, I've been up there 8 years now, and I've never seen a bill kind of get enacted quite so quickly. Bills go into effect sometimes immediately upon register, but this one has immediate effect, immediately invalidated driver's licenses for these people, and the state provided no funding for them to get new driver's licenses as well. I've never seen that before. And so we have one member of the legislature who is trans. Her name is Representative Boatman, and her driver's license got invalidated while we were up there, and then she had to drive back to Wichita back home with an invalid driver's license. Like, there was no way for her to have gotten her documents to be able to drive home. I've just never seen a bill that has done that before. There are many ways you could do that. You could say, even if you are anti-trans, and even if you do want them to not have their preferred gender on their driver's license, you could make them roll it over at their next birthday or whenever their next driver's license expires. But no, they just made it invalid immediately. The other part about that bill is that it also prevents people of the opposite birth sex from entering multi-occupancy spaces where the other gender could be undressed. And that is a really broad definition. The governor said this in her veto message, that if you are a husband who is trying to visit your wife in a hospital, and that hospital might be municipally owned, you would not be allowed to go visit her. If you are a boyfriend at K-State and you're trying to sneak into your girlfriend's dorm, technically that would be not allowed in this bill, and you would actually be potentially civilly fined for that as well. So it is just a really, really broad bill. The ACLU has already sued, and so now this is going to play out in the courts. But I just want to make the point that the cruelty was especially quick on that bill this year. My district has a lot of healthcare professionals, so I don't know if anybody else touched on this, but last week was the turnaround, as Ethan said, and we debated 120 bills in 3 days, which is what we believe to be a record. In one day, we debated, I believe, 54 bills. I would say it was not our best work. It's hard to kind of focus for 54 straight bills over 15 hours. But kind of a theme that we've been doing over the last couple of years has been what in the building we call turf wars between various healthcare professions. And so we've had 3 of those in the last 2 weeks. So one of them, anesthesiologists wanted to be able to license anesthesiology assistants to help them, because that would kind of lower their costs, because right now they're relying on CRNAs. And so that's a turf war essentially between the doctors and CRNAs. We had another one where naturopath doctors wanted to get prescriptive authority, and so the doctors really hated that one. And then just this week, there was one where optometrists wanted to be able to perform certain types of surgery, and then so the ophthalmologists did not want to do that. I did not know when I got elected that this would be such a big part of the job, navigating turf wars. We did one a couple of years ago, and it turned out okay, where APRNs, advanced practice nurses, wanted some more independent authority, and that's worked out okay, I think, in rural areas. But just every year, there's like 2 or 3 of these that happen every year. I voted no on all of those. I'm sure that there are good reasons to vote yes on all of them, but just kind of where we are at the healthcare system right now, I think I'm okay where we're at, and we don't need to be legislating these turf wars all the time. The last one is probably the most substantive thing that I wanted to update you on. This week, the House voted on what was supposed to be kind of our property tax position. The Senate has been very hard on kind of a hard 3% cap on valuations. The House has had more like of a nuanced position. So what the bill did when it moved out of committee, and this was House Bill 2745, is that it created a $60 million fund that the state would disperse to cities and counties. To get these funds, cities and counties would have to keep their budgets under last year's budget, plus 3% inflation, plus new build. They are allowed to go over that amount, but then citizens would be able to initiate a protest petition in order to undo that budget and roll it back down to that 3% mark. For a successful protest petition, you would need 10% of the voters of the last presidential election. So that's a really low bar, actually. Protest petitions in general are a little bit difficult, but in the city of Westwood, I think we said we have about 1,200 total voters. I think 10% of the last presidential would have been 112 votes. And so, I mean, you can imagine, like, you can just wander around at a park for 30 days, that's how much time, and just collect votes and say, hey, do you want lower taxes? Sign this. And doing that, if you collect enough signatures, just completely undoes that city's budget, and they have to redo it at a lower amount. I had mixed feelings about the bill coming out of committee, but we messed it enough on the House floor that I think all of us in the House at least voted no in the end. So what it did, they got rid of the $60 million fund for the state to pay back to the cities. So now, before that was supposed to be the carrot, The budget part was supposed to be the stick, like, hey, cities, control your budgets. And so then we had the carrot to like be, hey, here's some funds. Well, they got rid of that fund. So the state no longer is providing any more funds to the cities. And they also lowered that threshold from 10% down to 5%. So now 5% of the voters of the last presidential election can now undo a city's budget. That is just very, very, very restrictive.
They changed fast too.
Oh, that's right. 5% of the Secretary of State election. And so that's even lower. So I think in Westwood, that would probably end up being like 40 people could undo the entire city's budget. And so like the larger counties in the cities, like I think Johnson County probably would still be okay. That's a lot of signatures collect. Overland Park would probably be okay. But the large cities or the small cities would be really, really damaged by that. And it just completely hampers their growth. So we'll see where this goes. It is a hugely damaging bill. I understand kind of the inclination of what the House is trying to do, but just all these amendments that happen on the House floor just completely tanked it for most of us. So my opinion is the House needs to go back to the drawing board and come up with another plan. There are definitely targeted options out there for like low income seniors. Like when these property valuations rise, it's truly difficult to kind of keep up. Like for me personally, my property taxes are just kind of an escrow along with insurance, right? Like I don't really see that. I don't personally feel like I need a property tax cut. And so if there's something that we could do to kind of target it more, and then that allows cities to set their budgets. If the citizens don't like the city budgets, they can vote out their city council people next time around, and then we'll keep going. But we'll just have to see where that's going. But right now I don't know. It just feels like both chambers are dead set on their property tax bill still, like last year, and it just feels like very little is going to get done, unfortunately. So that's my update on that. I will turn it over to whoever wants to go next. Becky Fast.
Hello, I'm Becky Fast. I'm your county commissioner. I represent Northeast Johnson County. So this is my district. I take up most of the inside 435, but then go down to southern Leawood. So I wanted to start out with a positive note. In the Kansas, one of the issues that I've worked on is expanding the array of housing options, more affordable housing in Johnson County. In the Kansas legislature this year, there were like 30 bills introduced on housing. That's huge. I haven't seen that for years. In Congress, there is legislation that's moving that's bipartisan, housing for the 21st century, to expand housing supply, more affordable housing supply. So it's one issue that Congress has come together. A bill that I'm really excited about that I worked on that has gotten through the House. So during COVID, I heard from a number of residents that were being evicted. They had lost their job, they had a loved one in the hospital. And I started to research and learn about Kansas eviction law. So you could, and a lot of people live in these very large apartment complexes that the owners live in other states, the management company lives in other states. Very difficult to even get a hold of the management company. And so they, pay their rent through these portals. And so in Kansas, you have to pay your rent on the 1st. And if you haven't paid by the 3rd, you will get an eviction notice. And so with many people, their credit card expires. It might take them 5 days to get their new credit card on the portal. And now the eviction process has started. They will be out of their house by the end of the month. And it was just heartbreaking to me. I had a resident constituent whose family was in the hospital. Another one, he had broke his leg. He was a truck driver. He goes, I want to go back to work, but I don't have family and medical leave. I don't qualify for Medicaid expansion. I work. I just need a month. And I was trying to help him with services so he could pay his rent. But I thought, there's a broader issue that we need to work on in this county. So I met with our judge, our sheriff, our housing department. We developed this eviction mediation program. And so now our judge offers to residents to sit down with a mediator, and our Johnson County Community College trains mediators, and we're always looking for volunteers. And it's been a huge success that we got national awards, state award. And 700 families have been saved by homelessness because it gives a few weeks to get support. And many of these people don't stay, but it gets that, landlord there at the table, that management companies, usually not the landlords, because mom and pop landlords work with the residents, and it gives them the time to get out so the sheriff's not at their door with a warrant. So a large number is just giving them time to get out of the house, others to get resources or pay. So there's been a bill this session. So the other thing in Kansas, once you get an eviction, it's like gum on your shoe. You never get rid of it in Kansas. I mean, just so how do you ever get another housing option? So this bill that got through the House would have a time period so that you can expunge that eviction. It would also recommend to the judicial systems across Kansas to recommend and to look at setting up an eviction mediation program. So I'm hoping the Senate, Senator Corson, that you can convince your colleagues that we can get it through the Senate this year. It's a really great program to prevent homelessness. On the county side, you will be getting your tax appraisals. And usually when these go out, people all call me because it says Johnson County. And they look at their bill and say, Becky Fast, you're raising my taxes again. And so when you look at your bill, the Johnson County government is not the sole reason for your tax bill. 60 to 70% is your school district. And your cities are 15%, the counties around 20%. But with the tax lid going through, many residents are concerned about the valuations. We're showing that now across the county, the majority of people's valuations increase will be under 7%. But after year, that's really, people have been really experiencing increased revenue assessment values. Years ago in Kansas, there wasn't year by year reappraisal. So many people's homes were out of sync with the market. And so they weren't getting the market rate. And so that's the good news in Kansas, that your house, under Kansas law, our Johnson County appraiser has to appraise your house within 90% of the market value. And people will say to me, how can my house be worth that much? So that's not true. So I'll send them what houses are going for. And I often hear that from Prairie Village. And I'm like, your house is appraised way under what the average sales price in Prairie Village. And so our appraiser shows the data that what they appraise in Johnson County is, less than what their sales are going for because we have such a limited housing supply in Johnson County. So local, city and county rely on property taxes. And fire districts, that is their only source of revenue. They do not have sales tax. So if there's a tax lid and they're dealing with 4 and 5% increases in insurance for their staff, to get a fire truck anymore can take a year, and they've gone up by 20, 30%. So that tax lid would say, they can only have a growth in their budget by 3%. They might not be able to even hire one FTE because of that, because of all their other costs. So how does it benefit you that in Johnson County in the Northeast, I appoint the board members to the fire district? If you have a heart attack, they're at your house within 5 minutes. And because of that low response rate, your insurance is lower. Your insurance that you pay in your house is lower because in the Northeast, we have high response rates. In our rural area, we don't, and they have higher insurance rates because of that. So if they can't continue to meet the growth, the aging population, their response rates are going to go up. Our county library, their only funding source is property tax. So if they can't meet the growth, they are going to maybe not have weekend hours. Have fewer locations. And so I know none of us like property taxes, but there will be real consequences with that tax legislation. At the county level, we fund 911. You often hear in Missouri, people get placed on hold. In Johnson County, we get you to the ambulance in like half a minute. We have our ambulance rides typically under 5 minutes. We have crisis mental health, which relies on property tax. So at the county, we have sales and property, and then we have staff who can get grants. But our little cities like Mission Woods is basically, and Mission Hills, they don't have commercial, they don't have retail sales. So those cities are totally dependent on property tax. And so this, the question will be, and I will need to hear from you if this legislation comes into being, what services are we willing to reduce? What services are we willing to eliminate? We've been seeing huge cuts from federal. We had to lay off people for our women, infant, and children program. My heart just broke. That is, that program funds vital nutrition for babies and parents, but the feds cut that program to the state. And so then where do we take it from? Do we take it from mental health? Do we take it from our ambulance? And with the growth in our population, we're understaffed some days for our ready for our ambulance services. So the protest petition, Rep. Rees-Shu talked about that 5%. So in my race, 50,000 people voted in my race. I got 64% of the vote. So 64% of the people said, Becky Fast, we think you will govern the way. And maybe I was the best of the two bad choices. I don't know. Those are those people too. But at least those people said you're the best of the worst and we're voting for you. And so that's a significant, 50,000 people voted, 64% of that. I said, Becky, you're our woman. But now with this 5% protest petition, around 2,000 people can overrule the decisions I make. In Prairie Village, 600 people can overrule what our representative, Ron, is here. Roland Park, 157, Mission Hills, 100, Mission 210. So then why even have elected bodies? Maybe the state legislature, develops our budget. And so that protest petition, typically protest petitions, our election commission kind of certifies people who collect the signatures. Now I can just go put one in every door and then they can run it down to our election commission office. So even the process of that is really concerning to me. And so I just wanted to highlight, yes, our property taxes, the burden has shifted to residential. Over the last 50 years, the equity has moved from a more continuum. It has moved to the residential because we've exempted all these exemptions. So now the burden is on residential homeowners, and that hasn't ever been brought up. Do we take off some of these exemptions? And so I'm really concerned about this tax bill. I don't like paying my property taxes, but then what is the result? What services am I willing to give up? What services are you willing to give up? Because for local government, that is how we provide to fill those potholes for you. To have cities, 60% of their budget is police, it's public safety. So there's not a lot of bridge to nowhere that you see in the federal government budget. Often people complain about, we don't have a lot of that in city and county government. So thank you.
I am so thankful for this woman. Thank you again. Good morning, everyone. I'm Melanie Haas. I represent District 2 on the State Board of Education. That is basically Senate 7 and Senate 8 here in Johnson County. And then I've got parts. I used to say the southern part of Wyandotte, then I looked at the map again and I'm like, ooh, that's not quite right. But 2 Senate districts up in Wyandotte as well. So State Board meets every month in Topeka. And this is a really hard time of year because I'm trying to keep up with what I want and need to do for the State Board, but I'm also trying to keep an eye on what's going on in the legislature. And when I read yesterday that the House had passed out 120 bills this week, I was like, man, I didn't even have time. Usually I watch dozens of committee meetings and I just didn't have time this week. There is no way to overstate how insanely busy it's been in Topeka. So I want to start with, they were making fun of me over here because I make notes and then I scratch them out and kind of rewrite, because as we go, we're trying to sort it out. And I know we make a lot more noise this time of year too. You know, you all are trying to listen to the speaker in the front. You've got chatter over here. It's because we don't get to see each other during the week. And we're often catching up on like, what did you, ooh, I didn't know. And so, you know, there's a little bit of social, but we're also trying to make sure we get all the information to you. So I'm going to start with, the state board did meet early in February, and we get a legislative update during our meeting, but then we also have an opportunity to hear the legislative updates that go out to superintendents once a week. And so I tune into those as well and just try to kind of keep up. And we have a whole team of folks from KSDE that are over there testifying. We've got people that are back in the office kind of watching what's going on and trying to do that research as these things go. And so it's great to get those updates, and they're still already out of date, and it's just Saturday. So I think the general theme is the legislature is overstepping their authority when it comes to education. Like that's an easy one, and I think it is probably worse than I've ever seen it. They're always in our lane, and this year they're decimating our budget even more. So we talk about fully funding special education. The state board for several years kept every summer we would suggest, urge, recommend that the legislature move towards fully funding the special education overages at 92%. Last year we gave up and said, okay, how about 80%? And we're not even close. We're nowhere near close to 80%. We're not going to get there. And what we're seeing this year in the legislature is not just in the education committees, but there are little snippets of bills here and there that are eating away at our budget in other ways. And so I see this language a lot. There'll be stipulations that target schools, and then we're supposed to use existing funds. Use existing funds that we really don't have in the first place to pay for this new thing that they've come up with. So that's one of the things that really gets me. The things they're working on, there's a bill right now for state testing. They want to go back to the old cut scores. And I've stood here and talked to you about the immense amount of work that went into a new test and setting new cut scores so that we can really be adhering to this high rigor that we want to see in our schools. And they want to go back and they want to use the new tests because that's what we're using, but they want to go back to the old way of scoring it, which doesn't work because the questions are different. Imagine your answer key to the test is different, but they want to use the previous answer key. Seriously. And by the way, if the state board should decide not to follow this law, they wrote into the law that they will fine the department $2 million. So that's just one example. They're mad about not being in control. And so I'll go to, it's, you know, I talk all the time about how I listen to experts because I'm not an educator. I didn't come up through teaching. I ran for the seat because I wanted to serve my kids, and I wanted to do so wearing my technology hat. I felt that technology was something that was really being overlooked at the time when I ran in 2020. And obviously we've seen that come to bear, but I always come back to, I listen to the experts. And so whether we're taking teachers' licenses away or deciding how to license teachers, that's not something that I do individually as a board member. There are panels of experts that get together, that have done the research, that have the credentials, that have been in this field for a very long time. And what we're seeing come out of the legislature right now are ideas and ideology. I think it would be a great idea if we did this thing. Like, let's ban all the cell phones. Boom, just like that. If you've been coming to these meetings, you know that we've been talking about this for months and years. And maybe that's a little bit too long to be talking about it, but we're finally starting to take action. And it's a hard thing to do. 285 districts, each with a different community, very different community. The schools here don't look anything like the schools across Kansas. So we can't treat them all the same way. And they all have a locally elected board, 7 members on that board. I will always defer to local control. We're hiring, you know, if we're electing that board is then hiring the superintendent. That's how those things run. We need to let that play out. They follow KSDE's guidance, and that's where the state board comes in. So at our February meeting, we dug into some more research with some experts, and we had a whole tech month. In fact, we had very few votes. We had a very unusual meeting in February because it was a lot of presentations and only just a couple of things that the board took action on. So very quickly, we heard from McPherson Middle School. They came in and talked about their one-to-one devices. Where is Representative Stogsdill? I'm going to give him a wave. We're finally talking about one-to-one devices. And this has been a thing that I've been on for a long time. So they came and talked about how at the middle school level, they realized that these devices were creating a barrier. to learning, to socializing among friends. And so they took all the devices, put them on a cart, and said, we're not going to be one-to-one anymore. You don't need to take them home all the time. You don't need to have them in front of you in class. We're going to let teachers teach. And if the teacher decides that there's a lesson that they need these devices for, we'll wheel out the cart. They can issue the laptops for that class session, and then you can put them away. So they're not ever present. They're not a constant distraction, which for me means kids aren't playing games and surfing the internet instead of listening to the teacher. That's a good thing. We also heard from Beloit. They talked about their new cell phone policy, and it's always great to just hear that directly from a school. They said, we hear a lot about there are the hangers that hang in the front of the room. You can stick your phone in the pouch, and a lot of schools are doing that. But Beloit walked us through theirs and just said, thank you for letting us decide how we want to do this as local control. So, what I see from the legislature, and I don't want to leave out, because you all might like this, we did touch on AI a fair amount as well. The KU Center for Innovation, Design, and Digital Learning, known as CIDL, came and gave us an overview of their recommended AI framework for using AI responsibly in the classroom. And then we got to line that up with a teacher who came in and talked to us about how she used AI when she did a lesson for the Declaration of Independence with her kids for the 250th. And so that was fun because she actually handed out envelopes to all the board members. We got to do the lesson right there at the table. And what she did, she asked AI, and I think this is a great example. She asked AI, can you please translate the Declaration of Independence into a different voice? How about some pop culture voices that my kids know? And so she had a bunch of different voices, and she cut out little strips of paper, and it essentially made the Declaration accessible to these kids because they can read it in language that they better understand, and then they had to line it up with the original language. And so they played this little card game. We played the little card game. It was a ton of fun, and I thought that is the kind of use that I want to see for AI in the classroom. And so if you want to go back and watch any of the February meeting and check out those bits, those expert opinions and input on AI and technology, that is all there. But I just want to point out, this is a hard time of year because we're seeing more and more of these grabs for power from the legislature. And I worry things like the cell phone bill, any opportunity that they have to grab at curriculum, we're in a bad place if they start writing bills about curriculum and then they can't override the governor's veto when that happens. It will render the state board not exactly useless, but it really changes the dynamics of education in the state. And so that's what I'm watching right now, and that's what I'm worried about the most. And I'm going to hand it off to somebody else who can cover education and catch you up on what happened this week, and I'm going to go take some more notes. So thank you all.
Thank you, Board Member Haas. And thank you, Senator Corson. Thank you for having these multi-level explainers every month. Having the county perspective, having the state board perspective, having the House and the Senate is certainly beneficial. And I do appreciate Melanie's explanation of some of the chatter that occurs upon the side, because oftentimes we are making sure we got our notes straight and we know where everything's at. So I do apologize if we have interrupted any time, but the cell phone bill, I'll just pick up there. And I don't think state board member mentioned 247 out of 285 districts have a policy in place. So the House had this hearing and we sent it over to the Senate. Senate President said it's been materially altered and the House version is dead. There is still a version alive in the Senate, but it includes non-public schools, which was kind of the poison pill that the House was able to amend on the floor. So maybe we'll be done with the cell phone bill. The potty police, as discussed before, is in effect. So we'll see where that one goes. These were priorities too, folks. Charlie Kirk Day, Freedom of Speech Day. These were number one priorities. But I'll start with the committees I sit on. As you all know, well, my name's Jarrod Ousley. I represent House District 24. And I sit on child welfare and foster care. And I have not had to vote against but one bill in that committee this entire session. And that one bill that I did not support did not come above the line in the House. So that's good news. We did pass a bill that's going to try to implement a Johnson County model for a crisis stabilization center. It's going to try to recreate that throughout the state, maybe give us 2 or 3 more. It's going to come back from some Senate Bill 367, some juvenile justice reforms from ways past, and try to do some good for the kids and families across the state. It's a work in progress, but it made it out of the House. And I think we passed 3 or 4 other bills there as well. And then I sit on welfare reform, and as you all know, they don't want SNAP recipients being able to have soda pop or candy bars, and they are still hell-bent upon that. So soda pop and candy bar bill has passed the House, and it is also buried in the budget in a proviso, as well as another bill in welfare reform and committee on government efficiency. We conferenced on it the other day, and it is to have DCF share SNAP recipient personal information with USDA. So I don't know if you all remember Patrick Penn, but he's at the USDA now. He has requested this information from DCF, which could be shared with the ICE potentially, and could out undocumented Kansans. So the administration has said, no, this is not legally required of us. We're not going to comply with this. And the legislature is still trying to pry away at that. We did not agree on that. So stay tuned to that. I don't know what comes of it. There was a court ruling yesterday, I believe, in the administration's favor. I've not had a chance to dig into it yet. There was said to be a penalty, but we haven't seen that yet for noncompliance. We asked the staff for confirmation for the senator's claim that we were being assessed a $10 million penalty every quarter for non-compliance. Staff couldn't confirm that, so little victory. And then in the budget, I'm on appropriations, I'm on K-12 budget, and as far as the SNAP goes, we did get the $12.1 million in the budget of the House version for administrative cost. The HR 1 passed at the federal level, took it from a 50-50 match to a 75-25 match for states for administrative costs for SNAP, and we were able to get that covered, so that's a good thing. There is a vaccine proviso buried in this budget somewhere that we didn't get confirmation from staff until late in the game, that it's quite dangerous. It takes us from pediatricians, the pediatricians' recommendations for school vaccines to the RFK recommendations for vaccines. So this is, and like I say, we didn't get confirmation until late upon that, but it's buried in there. Keep an eye on it. I do have faith. And this is part of what I hate about giving you all updates right now is everything is so subject to change. We're talking over there. Some of us just saw each other a couple of days ago and new information is out already. So as of next week, all this could be subject to change, but it's definitely worthy of keeping an eye on. During the budget debate, Board Member Haas mentioned that the state board's request to get to 80% was $145 million to add to SPED. The governor's request was for $50 million to get us to 70%. Currently, the House position has a $10 million in there, so that would have been 80% with the board's recommendation, 70% with the governor's recommendation, and currently we are at 67.2%. And with the 10 million in the House position, that's to drop to 65.7. This may not mean much, but in all my years of working on SPED, I have heard that schools will start to close when we drop into the low 60s. So we're dangerously close. I've done some digging, and in 1998, we were at 80% of excess cost, and then the Montoya suit was filed. So we have been here before, and we have been funding at a higher percentage, and we have been sued. So we're we are here. You know, the talk of property tax relief, whether it was in the form of the bill that the House heard the other day or just in general rhetoric, there was $305 million of local property taxes paid last year by Kansans, collected through our USDs to apply to the backfill of the state's obligation to fund SPED. Again, this is not something the school districts can choose not to do. This is federally required. And according to the statute, it says shall be given first priority. So all these other pet projects that we're funding should be second to this obligation. And I offered an amendment on the floor. All these other amendments had been rejected in committee. And we offered an amendment on the floor to just hold us harmless. And that's the wrong term because the harm is done right now, but we can at least do no new harm and keep us at the percentage we're at. And that would have been an additional $24 million. And this $24 million was found in unspent ARPA dollars. So these were federal dollars that the state has that's not subject to requirement or maintenance of effort. And the legislature declined it. So it's we're in a bad way. It's an uphill battle, but we're not done yet. And I think on that bright note, I can hand it over to Representative Clayton, but stay tuned. You know, we've got opportunities and keep in contact with the legislatures.
Thank you, Representative Ousley. And honestly, I feel like we've been going for so long. I mean, like, are you guys getting tired? You need to do a 7th inning stretch. I'll try to keep it as short as I can, except I deserve to talk just as much as the other folks do. So, yeah, but in any case, so I represent the area from Metcalf to State Line, 83rd to 103rd. Unless you're east of Mission, then it's Somerset to 95th. So South Prairie Village, Old Leawood, Eastern Overland Park, think like Meadowbrook, Ranch Mart, that area. And I've been representing you for quite a while. This is my 14th legislative session. I've seen a lot of things that cannot be unseen. But, and it's funny because I still very much feel like a freshman legislator because a lot of the things that were coming up when I was a freshman legislator are back now. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, you know. Here we are trying to make these same efforts. I will talk a little bit about elections, although I'm not on the elections committee. None of our members here in the Northeast Johnson County delegation are on the elections committee, so a lot of you folks don't really get a lot of those updates. Trust me, you don't want them. I will give you one positive piece of news that came out of that. And that is the fact that there was a elections bill that would have moved our local government elections from odd years to even years. Now, as someone who runs in even years and is a state representative and is used to being pretty much at the bottom of the ballot, I can tell you that especially in presidential elections, turnout, like it does two bad things. It either drops completely because people will show up and they'll be like, okay, I'm going to vote for president. I'm going to vote for U.S. Senate and U.S. Congress. And okay, I'm not seeing it on TV every night, so I don't care anymore. And then they drop off entirely. Or worse, they might show up and say, well, you know, gosh, I really don't like the way that President Trump did things, so I'll show up and vote for Kamala. But, you know, gosh, I'm a Republican. I should vote straight ticket down the rest. Yeah. So then you have the less informed voters having an adverse effect on the more local and state races. Our local government officials do not know the pain that state legislators do because they run in nonpartisan elections in odd years that have a relatively low and highly informed turnout. So that is why we have kind of a different representation at the local government level. I love that for them. It must be very nice. And the Kansas legislature, simply by virtue of our numbers, by our blocks, has prevented that change from moving on because a lot of times what you guys don't see is the things that quietly get stopped just by the mere presence of these voting blocks. Because if you are in House or Senate leadership, you're not going to run a bill on the floor unless you know darn sure you have the numbers. So you're not going to see these dramatic things unfold where a bill fails on the floor. So, and that's by design, because why it's very difficult to take credit and say, hey, I stopped this, and there's no evidence of that. That's because the quiet evidence remains. And so right now, we do have a block that's able to stop those. So again, pretty good thing, right? We've got some other things that I don't like that are going on in local elections, and that is the fact that there was a bill that moved through that basically would outlaw all mail ballots. And I'm not talking, this isn't a gender thing, MAIL. So don't worry, we're still going to let men vote. You guys, we got to keep you, right? But so in Johnson County, especially in Shawnee Mission, a lot of our school bond issues are completely through mail. It's so easy. It's amazing. You fill it out on your kitchen counter and you turn it in, and then you voted to support schools. There is a rule that I have kind of noticed from the first time that I got elected, and it is this: if someone is trying to make it harder for someone to vote, they're not the good guy. And here is the thing that is actually pretty amusing, is that high turnout does not necessarily equal liberal representation. In fact, a lot of times that indicates quite the opposite. So it's like they're trying to stack the rules in a game that they're winning anyway. It's bizarre. I have always kind of maintained that, and I said this when I was on the redistricting committee, by the way, zero chance, at least currently, you all asked me about this last month, it still remains an incredibly low chance that we will get mid-decade congressional redistricting. I just do not see that. So again, another thing that was not stopped in a dramatic show for all of you, but it was stopped by people quietly saying no. So, but in any case, this is, some of the things that we're looking at, it's just the general creep where, you get these small regulations with elections. So then when we come up and we raise hell and say, well, hey, I don't like this ban on all mail ballot elections. And then they say, well, wow, Stephanie, calm down. Those are really expensive. Don't you care about cutting costs? And so they can do that sort of, calm down, sort of, gaslighting discussion, right? So that is what we're seeing, is what my history professor at Emporia called a war of attrition. It is slowly wearing things down, the frog in the pot being boiled to death. That is what we are looking at when it comes to our election policy. And, it would be nice if we could just have I would prefer the Secretary of State's office be nonpartisan. If I could have a priest do it, maybe someone who takes vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience and just lives in a hut somewhere and is completely unbiased, because that is the way that office should be. It handles our business filings and it handles our elections, and as such, it should be completely pure and totally unbiased. But no, that's not what we're going to get. So, in any case, that's what we're looking at with elections. I am also the ranking minority member on the Commerce Committee, and for that, I would like to request your prayers. Because normally the Commerce Committee is, again, supposed to be a very dignified committee that handles business and labor issues. And instead, we had the Star Bonds bill. It was just simply an extension of the sunset, added a couple of provisions that was, relatively uneventfully passed out of committee. But as you know, the Star Bonds bill, the Star Bonds are an economic development tool. We have several of those. But that economic development tool is important to the Chiefs Stadium deal. So we were kind of told some conflicting things. No, it's not needed for the Chiefs Stadium deal. Yes, it is. So a lot of conflicting information. But then passed out of committee with relatively few events. And then when we were on the House floor, all of a sudden, we should have just played the Benny Hill Show theme song in the background, because I had a committee chair that may or may not have been in a state of intoxication from the night before, running amendments saying, oh, yes, this is the amendment. Oh, wait, no, it's not. Oh, this does different things. It is not a professional way to do business, especially when we are talking about one of the most major and important economic development tools that the state has. Regardless of how you feel about the Chiefs Stadium deal, Star Bonds have brought a lot of good economic development. There have been some successful stories that have come from that, but it's the way that the process was run, the lack of professionalism, the lack of trust. I did not vote yes on that bill on the floor. I cannot endorse that kind of sloppy policy where we literally did not know what we were voting on, because there tends to be, I think my colleagues have talked a lot about this idea of like the process of control. And one of the things that I always thought of was that, you know, when the bad guys took over, I thought that they would be, you know, sharply dressed, fully in command, terrifyingly competent. And instead, it is the biggest amount of sloppy incompetence that I have ever seen. And then when you have folks that are showing up, you know, writing bill briefs with AI, right? Not doing their work on their own. When you have people that instead of using our impartial staff, because our staff on our revisor of statutes, when we ask them what is in a bill, they are state employees. They are your employees because you are taxpayers, and they are obligated to tell us the truth. One thing that a lot of people don't know about the Kansas legislature is that unlike US Congress, if you come to testify before us, you are not under oath. I mean, please tell the truth. It's generally accepted that you should, but you're not under oath. You can lie to us. There's very little recourse. So when you remove staff from the authority of presenting what is in a bill or amendment and have a layperson who is biased telling you what that is, you can't trust that legislation. And yet the push is, oh, well, goodness gracious, you're being impolite, you're being upset. Now, one of the things that you know some of our colleagues have mentioned is, again, the property tax issue. And so I won't belabor the point of the various bills that went down. I got here a little late, so I'm going to assume that Senator Corson covered the Senate tax plan with that 3% cap on valuations. And so here's a lot of it, is that what I think happens is that legislators and local office holders get in their bubble and they think all about me, and what is the process and how does this affect me and my governing body? And yes, obviously I have to think about those decisions as a legislator, but you know what? You're not doing your job if you're using personal pronouns, right? I should not be thinking about me. It's thinking about all of you. Here, and Commissioner Fast touched on this a little bit, but one of the main reasons why you all are paying what you're paying in property tax is not unlike what is going on with our election bills, but it is the slow creep, the just slightly shifting the burden from commercial to residential. So here's a little exemption here. That's really not that big of a deal, Stephanie. Why are you so upset about that? Here's another exemption for machinery and equipment that, you know, well, gosh, but this helps business. How many times do we hear that? Well, here's the thing, is that when commercial property owners experience loss, they can recoup that because their property makes money. Unless you're running a boarding house or an Airbnb or an illegal operation, please don't do that, by the way, your residential property is not going to make you money. It's a good place to live, and, you know, hopefully you're, you know, in a good spot as far as that's concerned. But this is why we have that huge shift. And so I think a lot of times we get caught up in, well, we need these taxes to run our government. Well, we all use these services and we all love them. But you know what? I care more about how it affects you guys. I care more about your ending balance than I care about the state's ending balance. And I know that because of federal inflation, you're hurting. Now, I think that the real solution to this would be to start repealing or putting freezes, at least, on some of these many little, perks and exemptions. And I also think a solid solution would be constitutional change, not to put a cap on the valuations, but to change our assessed valuations, because right now, thank you, I usually never get claps when I'm talking about taxes. It's usually people get bored, but to drop that assessed right now, it's assessed at 11.5% of the value. I think probably dropping it down to 9%, because homeowners are the ones who are shouldering the burden, and it didn't used to be that way. So your anger is justifiable. And so don't let anyone make you feel bad and say, well, what do you want to cut? No, you guys, you're hurting in your budgets, and we do care about you. I guess one other thing that I will close with, I did get to talk to the Shawnee Mission South students. I got to be on the panel with Senator Corson. It was a blast. So I didn't go to South. I went to Northwest. But my son attends South. He's a sophomore. So we did a little town hall for the American government seniors. And so I thought, my kid's not going to see me, but maybe I'll pop in and, humiliate him through my existence at lunch, right? And so then the forum ends, and I get this text, and it says, "Mom, you are so goated." And I'm like, oh my God. So in kid speech, GOAT is an acronym for greatest of all time. And if one is goated, one is, so, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, what'd you do? Like skip? So his teacher he was in his history class. His teacher also taught government and brought them in. So I'm like, all right, no matter what goes wrong, and trust me, plenty of things are going wrong at the state level, but we do care about you. We are working to get you results. But at least my kid thinks I'm goated. I don't know. Thank you for having us. I look forward to your questions. And yeah. I always feel like awkward when they're all walking up here, so. Senator Corson, everyone.
All right. We are going to do like a lightning round. Well, we will, famous last words, try to be brief in our responses so we can get in as many of your questions as possible. Maxwell will be coming around with a mic, so please wait till the mic gets to you so everybody on the Zoom can hear.
It's good.
Okay. Yes. I'm Chris Roselle. I live in Roland Park. Thank you. We know that young youth in Kansas voted essentially half the rate that we folks vote at. So consequently, government takes care of us and maybe not the youth. What's being done to, one, increase the civic engagement of our high school graduates, and two, make sure that they know how to collect facts and analyze data so that they actually get a government that represents them?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I have a junior in high school right now at Shawnee Mission South. I got to heckle last week as well. And I have the advantage of being able to talk to those teachers and have followed this conversation as both of my kids have gone through the entirety of their high school career. And so I'll just tell you that there are standards that have to be taught that surround civic engagement. And I see an awful lot of teachers going above and beyond in this space. And I'm always encouraged when I talk to government teachers and social studies teachers who say, not only are we doing all the things, but we're also making sure that they have access to getting signed up to register to vote even before they turn 18. Did you know that you can register to vote before you turn 18? Once you're 17, you can go ahead and register so that when your birthday rolls around, it's already done. So I hope that answers part of your question, but Chris and I know each other, and he knows that this is a passion of mine as well. So continuing to do all we can. Nathan McAllister at KSDE is also regularly bringing updates to the board and just talking about the work that they're doing across the state from kind of an outreach perspective, so that they are also, the department is working directly with those teachers and districts, especially as the 250th comes up. So I like that we have this opportunity around 250 to really do even more. Thanks.
Commissioner Fast talked about the mediation for evacuations. You mentioned it going through the House. Can you tell us the House bill number? I assume it has a House bill number, and it's currently in the Senate, right? You said
It is
it's already passed the House.
HB 2357 is the House, and then it's in the Senate now.
Thank you. So we can follow it and encourage our senators to look out for it. Thank you. Say that again. Say the bill number again.
It's HB 2357.
Am I on? Yes. A question for anyone, but probably for Stephanie. The Block Company, not of here, but of Oakland, California, has just announced a 40% reduction in its staff because of redundancies of A1. Hey, not A1, AI. Maybe it's in Kansas now, but if it isn't here, it's going to be. What is there pending in the legislature, or your thoughts about confronting or discussing what's going to happen with AI?
Well, all right. So what you'll end up seeing, so you're talking specifically about AI taking people's jobs, right? And so we have not seen any legislation going against that because, again, it would be perceived as anti-business, right? People like to, think that AI allows businesses to be more efficient. I think that is a huge concern, but I don't know if you're going to see a lot of restrictions when it comes to corporations. We have seen restrictions when it comes to AI, especially, generating child porn and things like that. So, and I proudly voted for that. I try to set an example when it comes to using AI in my work as a legislator. I have a colleague, she's a terrible person. And I guess, we can't, Christy Williams, she's awful. And she's from Augusta. She ruins everything, especially when it comes to education. And she uses ChatGPT basically the whole entire time. So I guess that makes sense why she sounds like a robot, right? But so in my conduct, I have only used AI once, and that was when I had to write an apology letter to some Republicans whose feelings I hurt. And I knew that if I said it in my own voice, they would be able to tell how insincere I was. So I did use AI to write that because I had to save a bill of the governors they were holding hostage. So that is the one and only time I have used it as a legislator. I think that we should not use it in our own conduct. But when it comes to corporate restrictions like that, I'm not really seeing that coming.
Yeah, just real quickly, my son teaches down at the University of Arkansas, and I asked him a couple weekends ago that I said, how is AI affecting your students and the papers that they turn in and everything? And he said, oh, no problem, Dad. I've got an AI program that checks for that. Yeah.
I have a question about regulations of nursing homes. One of the many things the administration has done on a national level is reduce regulations that protect consumers. And we were talking about that earlier in the session. In particular, in nursing homes, they have removed the regulation that there has to be a registered nurse there for 24 hours a day, as well as decreasing the number of people who are dealing with the residents of the nursing home. One of the issues is that it really puts the residents at more risk. And I was wondering if at the state level, you're trying to do things to try to mitigate that so it doesn't happen in the same way in this state as it is happening in others. Because I'm concerned that the nursing homes are going to become death traps.
Thank you for the question. I would say I have not experienced the state wanting to tackle this. If anything, like Stephanie said, they have a pretty powerful lobbying force, the nursing homes do in Topeka. And so last week during our 120 bill turnaround, one of the bill was expanding the number of residents that could be in a Homes Plus facility. If you're not aware of that, is Homes Plus is basically like a residential house that has been converted to like a residential nursing home facility, basically. Expanding that from 12 people, a maximum of 12 people, to a maximum of 16 people. And that bill got through. And then that is a lot of people in a residential house. Even if they're nice, even if it's a nice facility, that's a lot of people. So we just keep seeing, kind of like what Stephanie was saying, this kind of chipping away at regulations that are protecting our residents in nursing homes.
But I will add to that, in the Appropriations Committee last week, we had an informational hearing with the long-term care ombudsman. And I think it was a 23-page, handout that she gave. And I was pretty impressed with a lot of the slides on her PowerPoint. And I think one of her final closing comments was, I hope I have a job next year. So I do think we have a champion in our ombudsman currently.
Thank you for all the work you've done representing us in Topeka this year. I have a hard time narrowing my question given the particular volume of cruel and particularly problematic bills that have come out this session. It's demoralizing in many ways. But I'm going to direct my question to a property tax theme, which I believe is one of the number one priorities for this session, was to address property taxes. And there's a bill that came out of the Elections Committee, which I'm sorry, I don't think any of you sit on, but it's focused on prohibiting the advocacy of any elected official or state employee from speaking about ballot measures and bond measures. And when I think about the work we do around for our schools and maintaining our facilities, this would be a particularly stringent gag order on bond work that schools do. So we have no mail ballots potentially. And then our school districts are not going to be allowed to really speak to bond issues except for a very specific list of financial restrictions. And there's a Class D misdemeanor associated with this. So any elected official or employee of the school district that talks about the why of a bond could be subject to a misdemeanor. And when I think about all of the things that impact our property taxes, our state not paying for public education, that comes down to, or for special education, that comes back to it. Restricting funding for at-risk kids, that's going to come back to local property taxpayers. All these unfunded mandates on schools, that comes back to local property taxpayers. And now they're adding kind of this gag order on speaking about the why of bonds. And that passed the House with 88 votes. And so I'm concerned if this comes to the Senate or if there's an opportunity to peel off some votes, if it hits a veto override, if it passes the Senate. And again, I apologize, I don't think any of you sit on the Elections Committee, but if there's anybody who might want to speak to that, it's 2451 is the House bill.
That's Shawnee Mission School Board member Mary Sinclair, by the way. So she's very passionate about this, and she's done a wonderful job. My memory, I guess you would know the vote count better than I was. I would say the chatter on the building is not that enthusiastic about that bill. So maybe it's one of those bills that leadership says, yeah, we'll take a vote on it, vote for it, but maybe we don't take it up on the override, hopefully. There's just such a volume of bad bills coming through the elections committee, as the others have touched on, of just the elections chairman running for Secretary of State, just cramming this through. The genesis of this bill was basically that a representative from Hutchinson was mad that the school board in Hutchinson was kind of advocating, or at least just talking about a school board measure that would ask for a bond. And he got mad about it and saw yard signs, and he created this bill. So I don't have any particular inside knowledge other than to say that I think we have enough local elected officials in the Kansas House that I would be relatively confident on a veto override, but hard to say.
Would that pertain to the protest petitions too, that like city and county couldn't speak on that too?
All right, let's do one more. We've gone long today. We will do, if there's one last one. All right, we are good. We are going to leave it here. This was our 63rd consecutive monthly town hall. And I just want to say, I was sitting in the back listening to my colleagues, and we are just so lucky as a community to have these folks representing our community on the county commission, on the state board of education, in the state house. These are some of the most respected members statewide on so many of these issues. So I've just had a moment back there just thinking how fortunate we are. I mean, these are folks who are all seen by their peers as leaders on all of these issues. So I hope you will join us again next month. We will no doubt have a lot to share with you. Things are moving very fast. So we'll see you on the 4th Saturday in March. Thank you so much. Take care.